You are on assignment.
Now, a behind-the-scenes look.
Hey everybody, I'm Imran Siddiqui here with my co-host Alex Villarreal, and this is On Assignment, where we take you behind the scenes at the Voice of America.
Today on our show, international intervention in Mali. We'll hear from our reporter on the ground about the fight against Islamist extremists in the West African nation.
And it's not just Mali that's affected. The conflict has crossed the border into Algeria, where a deadly hostage crisis has triggered worldwide concern.
And back here in the United States, a debate about mental health services after a string of violent attacks.
And move over Sea Biscuit. We'll look at some other horses with a special place in the U.S. history.
Don't go away, we're going on assignment.
French forces have intervened in the West African nation of Mali, taking back towns seized by Islamist militants. VOA French to Africa reporter Idriss Fall is in northern Mali, traveling in areas affected by the fighting.
The situation is volatile and many Malians are cut off from food, phone lines, and other essentials. I spoke with Idriss for a first-hand account of the conflict, and he told me that many people welcomed the arrival of the French military. Let's take a look.
In every single city I went in, you will see French flags onto houses, onto cars. You will see kids selling French flags, and even one of them I spoke with in Bamako told me he could make kind of 30,000 CFA, which means around $60 a day, selling French flags. So it's something new, which shows how people now are behind what France is doing here.
What is the level of fear among the Malian population?
Well, I think, let's say a city like Timbuktu, they were bombing, and people are scared about what may happen next when the ground troops arrive. Because even in Sevare, where I was yesterday, we've discovered some dead bodies down there. And when we visited a village called the Wahilirde in Sevare, where you have the cemetery, the people who lived that village told us that it was the Malian soldiers who executed those people accused of being friends of the Islamists.
Idriss, what's it like being a journalist right now in Mali?
Well, very tough, I can tell you. Very tough, because I arrived in Sevare last Saturday, and I was lucky enough to be among the first journalists down there. And I was among some of our French journalists. And then the night we received calls from our colleague at the oversight of the city telling that they was not allowed to enter the city. So even among them, CNN was returned back to Segu, and we were inside the city, and we began doing our report. The first thing we discovered was those dead bodies inside Sevare, and I think some people did not like that report.
And Idriss, you had your own personal scare while in Mali. You received word that a colleague, a friend of yours, was killed. Can you tell us about what happened?
Well, you know, when I was driving to go to Sevare, and people called me to give me information, and I think maybe 2 hours or 3 hours before I arrived in Sevare, I got the first call from somebody I know, I trust, and 1 hour later, I got another call from somebody I know, I trust, most of them from Gao itself, and I was wondering how did it happen. They gave me, okay, Kader, your friend was killed because of Islamist fear that he was giving information to the French army, and he got killed by this guy I know. He was the one who attacked our stringer in Gao. When I arrived in Gao, I was in this kind of emotional situation. I could not really believe that could happen.
Idriss, you actually heard from him after you had thought that he had been killed by the extremists, and then you got a call from him. What went through your head when you heard from this friend that you had been thinking for several days had been killed?
This relief, you know, I think there's nothing else you can say. The relief, you know, a heavy burden was on me. I was even crying when I arrived in Sevare, and to know that Kader was alive, I think it was the best news you could have in the middle of a war.
Finally, just one last question. Why is the situation in Mali, why is what's going on important for the rest of the world?
Well, I think this intervention has to succeed. It has to. If not, everybody heard about what happened last week in Algeria. Everybody knows that the Islamists, they have young kids. They recruited from Niger, from Chad, from Mali, from all those countries in West Africa. And you know, when they cannot fight a conventional battle, I think they can bring stability everywhere, not only in Mali, but everywhere. It has to succeed.
And our thanks again to VOA's Idris Fall reporting to us from Mali. We're going to turn now to Algeria, which is facing its own repercussions from this conflict in Mali after militants took 132 foreign hostages at a natural gas complex in the country's east. At least 37 of the foreigners were killed in the standoff between the militants and Algeria's military.
The incident has raised fears in Europe about the targeting of foreign-owned assets across the region. On assignment, Martin Seacrest spoke with reporter Henry Ridgwell in London. For more, let's check this out.
Well, it did draw worldwide attention, and it has to be said that details are still quite sketchy, really, because of the remoteness of the location where the attack took place. It was at the In Amenas gas plant in Algeria, right in the middle of the Sahara Desert on the Libyan border. It appears that several trucks full of up to 50 or more gunmen rolled up to the plant and initially tried to attack buses which were carrying workers from their living quarters to the actual plant itself. And when that attack was foiled and the workers managed to escape, they then went on to attack the living quarters and the gas site itself. Over the course of 3 or so days, many of the hostages managed to escape by scaling the fence, cutting holes in the fence. It's a sprawling plant, so obviously the gunmen weren't able to control all of it. And then the finale was the Algerian special forces decided to go in and attack the militants. About 5 of the gunmen were arrested.
British Prime Minister David Cameron postponed a key speech on Europe after chairing an emergency meeting with ministers. He briefed Parliament.
I offered UK technical and intelligence support, including from experts in hostage negotiation and rescue, to help find a successful resolution. And I urged that we and other countries affected should be consulted before any action was taken.
Observers say that the diplomatic language masks the anger in European capitals and beyond over the way Algeria has handled the hostage crisis.
Clearly the business community in the UK where you are and also in Europe has reacted to this as well as obviously everyone else, but is there a feeling of widespread great unease in the business community about future possible situations like this?
There is, simply because there is so much money invested in this part of the world. Let's take Algeria just by itself. The hydrocarbon industry accounts for about 98%, according to its own government figures, of the economy. And up till now, few of these plants, few of these hydrocarbon extraction plants or mines or so on had been targeted by militants. Of course, the presence of militants in the area has been an ongoing problem. But this latest attack has shaken the City of London and other financial centres across Europe and the West. In boardrooms, in Shell and BP and other big companies, they're asking themselves whether the risks are too high to remain in these sorts of areas.
The loss of a facility is one thing, but losing 20% of your share price is a completely different situation. And I think that for a lot of people in the major boardrooms not far from here in central London, there's some serious discussions going on about long-term implications. This is not a problem that's going to go away in 3 weeks or in 3 months.
British oil giant BP, the co-operator of the In Amenas gas plant, has begun pulling out non-essential workers from Algeria. David Rubens says the French military intervention in Mali, which the attackers say prompted their action, has raised the stakes across the region.
I think the likelihood of an attack of this nature being made on a facility of this nature had to be considered a possibility.
Henry, British Petroleum was a co-operator of that plant in Algeria, and now they have already removed some of their workers from the country. Obviously, if a trend like this were to continue, and BP were to pull out, as well as other companies, you get a ripple effect economically across the region, right?
Yeah, it would. A huge impact on the local economies in these sorts of countries. So far, they're being contained. BP has withdrawn all its non-essential workers from its plants in Algeria. I think the hope is that once the hysteria calms down a little bit, these non-essential workers can be put back in place in Algeria, and security likely to remain tight for many months and many years ahead, because everyone here believes that while this may have been a one-off attack, for the moment, the problem of targeting big companies like this, big state-owned and big private companies in remote locations like the Sahara, isn't going to go away anytime soon.
Henry Ridgewell reports for VOA from our London bureau.
We're going to take a break now. Coming up, is the U.S. providing enough mental health care? It's a question many have been asking lately. You're watching On Assignment.
The U.S. gun control debate has led the headlines recently, but it's not the only issue being discussed after recent mass shootings. In December, a 20-year-old gunman opened fire in a Connecticut school, killing 20 young children and 6 adults. The tragedy has left Americans searching for ways to do a better job of helping the mentally ill. I'm joined right now by VOA's Carla Babb, who's looked at the story through the eyes of those who have experienced it with regards to what happened in Virginia Tech in 2007. Thank you for joining me. Who did you speak to and what did they say?
Well, as you know, Imran, the Virginia Tech shooting was the deadliest school shooting in U.S. history. So I spoke to Joe Samaha, whose daughter was one of those killed in the Virginia Tech tragedy. And he said that whenever a mass shooting like the one in Newtown occurs, he becomes re-traumatized and numb. And he understands what the parents are going through because he's been through it. But he told me that after he and his wife pushed through the pain of losing their daughter, they started to think about what we can do as a society to make sure these things don't happen again. And he broke it down into 2 different parts. He said, first, you need to deal with hardware issues. Are there proper locks? Do you need bulletproof glass? Do you need to have 2 doors if a shooter were to come into a classroom and block a door? Can the students exit in another door? But then he said you also need to focus on software issues. And these are issues like anti-bullying programs and mental health awareness and training.
That's fascinating. But tell me something, Carla. Some of the people that you spoke to talked about mental health first aid.
That's right.
What does that mean?
Well, I'll explain it to you like the mental health first aid instructor explained it to me. Basically, she says, there are lots of people that are trained in CPR and first aid, so if somebody were to pass out or stop breathing, there is someone that can help them until the paramedics arrive. So the organizers of this program were thinking, why don't we have a mental health first aid? So if someone is having a mental crisis, a regular person will be able to step in and help.
That's fantastic. Let's look at your story, come back, and then we'll talk in detail.
She used to light up the stage.
When Joe Samaha heard the news about a mass shooting at Virginia Tech, he began to worry. His daughter Rima was a student there.
I watched the numbers, the toll going up, and I said, something's going on. Let me call Rima.
She never answered. Rima and 31 others were killed by Seung-Hui Cho. The Virginia Tech student ended the rampage by taking his own life. Professor Lucinda Roy tutored Cho in 2005.
He would speak in the softest whisper I've heard. So, for example, if I were to ask him a question, say, how are you doing today? He would say, I'm doing all right. But it might take him 20 seconds to say, I'm doing all right.
Unknown to Roy, Cho had a mental illness called selective mutism. It kept him from speaking in certain situations. Some of his peers bullied him. Roy says she tried unsuccessfully to get help for Cho.
Our counselors, even now, have to see 1,750 students per counselor. That's the ratio. It's ludicrous.
Virginia state lawmaker Rob Krupika wants to make sure a massacre never happens again.
I think instead of arming our teachers with guns, we should be arming our teachers with tools to identify mental health issues in their school community.
He introduced a bill calling for $2.5 million to fund mental health training for teachers in Virginia schools. He started looking for programs with proven results.
And mental health first aid became really rose to the top of that list very quickly.
Individuals with psychosis are often victims.
Mental health first aid in 12 hours presents warning signs and risk factors for common mental illnesses.
This is her best friend, Carla.
Leslie Roberts is an instructor. She says the class also tries to remove the stigma of mental illness.
We're taking it out of this is a willful, moral, judgmental status that you just won't work hard enough, versus the brain has chemistry in it and it's not functioning on a physical, biochemical level that helps this person live the life they really want to live.
Here, students learn about how difficult it is for a person who hears voices to talk to someone.
What do you want? What are some of the things you want to learn about the training?
Social worker Tiandra Grant says the class teaches her to notice when someone's having a crisis.
Everyone could benefit from this because in the end it's going to make our community safer.
For Joe Samaha, state funding for this training is a step in the right direction.
You're going to pay now or you're going to pay later. And unfortunately, we've been paying with the lives of our children.
He says he'll continue to advocate for mental health awareness, giving the daughter he lost a stage for making a difference. Carla Babb, VOA News, Fairfax County, Virginia.
I see this bracelet that you're wearing. What is the story behind this bracelet?
Well, Joe Samaha and members of his community are honoring the legacy of Rima through something called the Angel Fund. And the Angel Fund has provided a grant for local schools to have another program that was started by a Virginia Tech professor and students called Actively Caring for People. And so this is their bracelet. It has a number, 3449, that's mine. And what you do is when you see an act of kindness, you hand someone a bracelet. Okay. And then they pass it on when they see an act of kindness. And what's fascinating about this is they've been able to track it online, because you put it online and you can see where your bracelet goes. And they've had bracelets that started right here in this area end up in Europe and all across the United States. So one small act here can have a global impact.
That's fantastic. Where's mine?
Well,
you're
I'm just
always
kidding. It's okay.
Nice to me. No,
so
that's yours.
You definitely deserve
That's yours.
this.
Thank you so much for joining us, Carla Babb. Fantastic reporting as usual. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're taking a break now. Still to come, the long history of some horses that still are being used by the U.S. military. You're watching On Assignment.
U.S. military veterans have the right to be buried in a military cemetery if that's what they choose. The nation's largest such burial ground is Arlington National Cemetery near Washington.
The solemn task of pulling service members' caskets to their final resting place falls to a team of horses with a history dating back to the 1800s.
VOA's Julie Tabo spent a day with these horses known as caissons and the men who ride and care for them. I talked with her about their important role at Arlington National Cemetery. Let's watch.
Caisson, forward, ho! Caisson, forward, ho!
Both the horses and the men who care for and ride them have been specially trained for this solemn duty. They are members of the caisson platoon of the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, known as the Old Guard.
So Julie, coming here and actually getting a chance to witness these horses doing their duty in person, what was that like for you?
Well, it was quite wonderful being in their presence. It's quite different seeing the pictures of them and even on their website seeing behind-the-scenes shots. Being in their presence, the first thing that struck me was how big and powerful and beautiful they are. They're very well maintained. So we arrived when they were being washed, and we stuck around as they were being groomed and saddled up. But there was something about them too, they carried themselves with such dignity.
What is this training process like?
It's quite a vigorous training, actually. They are trained at Fort Belvoir, which is not too far from here. They have a herd manager that goes all over the country, and they look for big, powerful horses. But more important than anything is disposition.
This is a very somber responsibility that these horses have, and I think it's an image that a lot of Americans know very well, this image of horses drawing the flag-draped casket behind them. What can you tell us about this question that you asked? You asked of one of the trainers, are the horses aware of the significance of what they're doing?
They are very sensitive to body language. They know they're not here for fun. They know it's something serious. The way they hold themselves, you can kind of tell when they're pulling this casket along. They're very focused. They're quiet in that stance that they are just, clipping along. They know they have a job to do. They do it day in and day out, up to 4 funerals a day, and do it well.
How did it come to be that these horses became such an important part of the honor of burying our nation's fallen?
Well, this tradition goes back to the early 19th century.
Army Sergeant First Class Eric Heyman says it's a tradition that dates back to the early 19th century, when horse-drawn caissons moved men and equipment to and from the battlefront.
The horses were used to pull those weapons, and it was also for getting the wounded back to the hospital. Well, later it evolved. We didn't need those anymore, and we later turned that duty into caisson duty of moving our fallen heroes in Arlington National Cemetery.
What do you think it's important for people to know about them?
These horses are an extension of our U.S. service members. They are performing a task, they are performing a duty for their country, and are trained in many ways like our soldiers are. The whole ritual is a very beautiful ritual to watch.
Retired Army Colonel Robert Gambino is laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery, just outside the Capitol. This decorated soldier received full military honors, a gun salute, and an escort platoon, accompanied by the U.S. Army Band. A matched team of horses pulled his flag-draped casket on a caisson to the gravesite. A riderless horse, another distinction of his rank, followed behind. The boots face backwards to symbolize that the warrior will never ride again. Caisson horses have been performing the sacred ritual here for more than 60 years.
I would think that the families of our fallen soldiers, whether they are eventually retired and pass on or have fallen in the line of duty, it's a great honor to watch and to be a witness to not only the warriors who are giving their final respects, but these horses to be part of that ceremony.
All right, and again, that was VOA's Julie Tabo speaking with me at Arlington National Cemetery.
Okay, and did you get a chance to ride any of these horses?
I actually did not. Unfortunately, I didn't even get a chance to see any of the horses, just the video that Julie brought back from her piece, but I very much enjoyed hearing her describe them and talk about their training and everything.
What about the white horses? What do you call them?
So the white horses are actually called Lipizans, and they are descendants of a line of horses that were donated to the military over 30 years ago.
Fantastic. I love horses. I wish I could ride some of them.
Yeah, very, very interesting story. Well, that is all we have for today, but please join us again next week when we look at the deepening crisis in Egypt with insights from our correspondent in Cairo.
We'll also talk with our Moscow correspondent about Russia's controversial move to ban U.S. adoptions of Russian children.
And we'll have a little movie magic as we talk about the Academy Awards with our VOA Indonesian service Red Carpet team.
In the meantime, be sure to check out On Assignment at voanews.com and on our Facebook and YouTube pages.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.